Welcome to Eternal Freedom. Today we are going to explore Nirvana. So the word Nirvana comes from Sanskrit and Pali, the Pali language, and it means extinguished state. So when we say extinguished, what do we mean by extinguished? Extinguished or extinguishing what? So extinguished refers to extinguishing sufferings. That's what Nirvana refers to. Similarly, in Tibetan as well, Nirvana has a different connotation, but means state beyond sorrow. Again, it refers to a release from suffering. So the gist of the word Nirvana is free from suffering or cessation of suffering. So Nirvana itself can be defined in different ways, and I have today picked the Chan school of Buddhism to follow through some of the terminology that we will be using today. And in exploring Nirvana, we will also talk about some of the things that we observe on the various other paths, namely the path of knowledge or the path of action or path of energies, just so that we actually understand when people are talking about nirvana, what are they actually meaning? What does it actually imply? So, defining nirvana in the Chan school of Buddhism, they have got approximately 43 examples of describing it by negation. And they have another 50 odd examples of describing it or defining it through affirmations. So negation, as the name implies, is the negative, and so it goes like an example would be without form, without limit, without outflow, without beginning, without attachment, without end, without clinging. And affirmation, an example of an affirmation would be absolute reality, being wondrous, serene, permanent, secure, ultimate, most perfect, the truth, suchness. So lots of different examples. And similarly, there's lots of metaphors of using different examples to describe it. We won't dwell on that today. So the next question that arises is, how do you gauge your progress? How do you know where you are on this journey towards nirvana? If nirvana is one of the goals that is established in Buddhism. So for that, in the Buddhist tradition, there are four agamas, and these are: nirvana is sweeping the mind clean of greed. That's the first one. The second one is sweeping the mind clean of hatred. The third one is sweeping the mind clean of ignorance, delusion, and erroneous views. And the fourth one is sweeping the mind clean of affliction. So if one were to assess where they stand in this journey towards nirvana, they need to just take these four agamas of greed, hatred, ignorance, delusion, and affliction of the mind and see where they stand. If there is still some remnants of any four of these, then you have some way to go. So interestingly, in the Buddhist tradition, there are also what we call as the Eightfold Path of right action, right thoughts, etc. But in addition to that, especially in this Chan school of Buddhism, there are what we call as precepts. So precepts are like, in a way, like principles. An example of precepts in this particular case, there are five precepts. So the first precept is to refrain from killing, quite straightforward. The second one is to refrain from stealing. Everyone understand what stealing is. Third one is to refrain from sexual misconduct. There's a whole description of what might be construed as a sexual misconduct. And the fourth one is to refrain from lying. And it has many different levels, ranging from bearing a false witness with evil intent to doing harm through irresponsible and casual remarks. Um, and the fifth one is to refrain from consuming intoxicants. Now, one thing about these precepts and the way they may have come about is potentially a time when people were consuming a lot of intoxicants. So these precepts were devised at that time. And to fast track people's journeys on the spiritual path, sometimes people may indulge in drugs and various other substances. So hence some of these precepts have been formed. These precepts, though, are not very different from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras or the Yama and Niyama. So on that, you have also similar sort of guidelines that are given about not coveting, not stealing, etc. And what these tend to do is to ensure that the fundamentals are there before people go into progressing into taking on some of the more advanced practices. So these foundational things are more to do with ethics and values and um, rightly pointed out, like yamas and niyams. Now, the interesting thing about nirvana, though, is that there are also four different types of nirvana. Now, um, some text only talk about three different types, but we're going to just follow the Chan school of Buddhism, and in this, the first kind is the pure nirvana of inherent nature. It's also seeing of dharmakaya. So dharmakaya is the truth. So when one realizes the truth, they have um, said to have attained pure nirvana. Um, it's kind of related to similarly is related to on the path of knowledge when someone has realized who they are, realized their essence, and also realized that everything around them is an illusion. One could say that that's consistent with what is called in this school of Buddhism as pure nirvana. The the next kind of nirvana is nirvana with remainder, which is quite commonly used in most other Buddhist traditions. Nirvana with remainder. Now, that refers to the fact that the person has or a being has realized their true nature. They've also realized that everything else is an illusion. they have realized the secret of doership or non-doership. And with the result, any action they take from here on is free from any consequence. However, they still have past karma to burn. And when we say nirvana with remainder, that remainder refers to the remaining karma that is yet to be wiped out. So typically, a being or person attains nirvana with remainder when they are alive, and when they die, they achieve or they attain nirvana without remainder. That means the past and the future and all of those um, karmas are burned, and then the person is free from the cycles of birth and death. That is how the Buddhist tradition describes this. So in the case of Buddha, he was, when he realized Nirvana under the Bodhi tree, he was considered to have attained Nirvana with remainder. And after 40 years or 45 years, when he passed away, he was supposed to have attained Parinirvana or Mahanirvana, and that is Nirvana with without remainder, which means he was free from the cycle of birth and death. Now, in terms of the yogic tradition, when someone has realized their true nature, they realize especially on the path of action, if they have gone beyond the state of doership, they would be considered to have achieved the state of nirvana without remainder or with remainder. And as they go through burning their past, they would be achieving nirvana without remainder. And on the path of knowledge, I think that is quite clear what that means. But then you have another type of nirvana, which is non-abiding nirvana. And this nirvana is, as the name sort of refers, it is a nirvana which is realized when a person is alive. So in this state, the being is supposed to have realized and become a Buddha, and they neither remain in the state of suffering, nor are they in a state of this passive state. And so the non-abiding peace means that without my understanding of this from a path of knowledge perspective would be, it is a state wherein there's effortless action, or the being is not taking any actions to abide in its natural state. And that natural state is that state of being, of presence, of oneness. And when the person has achieved that state, they have essentially become a Buddha. So in summary, there are 4 types of nirvana. Pure nirvana, nirvana with remainder, without remainder, and the non-abiding nirvana. The first 3 types of nirvana can be easily equated to the realization of the self, of the essence, and the distinctions between the different types of nirvana relate to, within these 3 categories, just relate to the ability to have burnt your past karmic debt. and hence be completely free from the cycle of birth and death. Um, and the last category, the fourth category of non-abiding nirvana, uh, in my understanding, would equate to the effortless effort, or the state of being, the state of presence. And that is something that a person can be while they are still alive. Whereas the nirvana without remainder is something that you achieve once you have left your body and you've already realized your true nature, and you're free from the cycle of birth and death. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.